Hey everybody, today we're going to finish reading Trial by Combat. Same thing that we've done the other 2 days. I'm going to start with just a quick recap of what happened, where we're at, and then we will finish the story. I will direct you to pause the video when it's time to answer a question that's embedded in the text. Okay, Trial by Combat by Shirley Jackson. So this is part 3. At this point, after going to Mrs. Allen's apartment, Emily leaves Mrs. Allen and she's planning what to do next. The following evening, when Emily came home from work, a pair of cheap earrings was gone, along with 2 packages of cigarettes, which had been in her dresser drawer. That evening, she sat alone in her room for a long time, thinking. Then she wrote a letter to her husband and went to bed. The next morning she got up and dressed and went to the corner drug store, where she called her office from a phone booth and said that she was sick and would not be in that day. Then she went back to her room. She sat for almost an hour, with the doors slightly ajar, before she heard Mrs. Allen's door open, and Mrs. Allen come out and go slowly down the stairs. When Mrs. Allen had had time to get out onto the street, Emily locked her door and, carrying her key in her hand, went down to Mrs. Allen's room. Pause here and answer question 1. She was thinking, I just want to pretend it's my own room, so that if anyone comes I can say I was mistaken about the floor. For a minute after she had opened the door it seemed as though she were in her own room. The bed was neatly made and the shade drawn over the window. Emily left the door unlocked and went over and pulled up the shade. Now that the room was light, she looked around. She had a sudden sense of unbearable intimacy with Mrs. Allen, and thought, this is the way she must feel in my room. Everything was neat and plain. She looked in the closet first, but there was nothing in there but Mrs. Allen's blue housecoat and 1 or 2 plain dresses. Emily went to the dresser. She looked for a moment at the picture of Mrs. Allen's husband, and then opened the top drawer and looked in. Her handkerchiefs were there, in a neat small pile, and next to them the cigarettes and the earrings. In one corner the little china dog was sitting. Everything is here, Emily thought, all put away and very orderly. She closed the drawer and opened the next 2. Both were empty. She opened the top one again. Beside her things, the drawer held a pair of black cotton gloves, and under the little pile of her handkerchiefs were 2 plain white ones. There was a box of Kleenex and a small tin of aspirin. For her plants, Emily thought. Pause here and answer question 2. Emily was counting the handkerchiefs when a noise behind her made her turn around. Mrs. Allen was standing in the doorway, watching her quietly. Emily dropped the handkerchief she was holding and stepped back. She felt herself blushing and knew her hands were trembling. Now she was thinking. Now turn around and tell her. Listen, Mrs. Allen, she began, and stopped. Yes, Mrs. Allen said gently. Emily found that she was staring at the picture of Mrs. Allen's husband. Such a thoughtful-looking man, she was thinking. They must have had such a pleasant life together. And now she has a room like mine, with only 2 handkerchiefs of her own in the drawer. Yes, Mrs. Allen said again. What does she want me to say? Emily thought. What could she be waiting for with such a ladylike manner? I came down, Emily said, and hesitated. My voice is almost ladylike too, she thought. I had a terrible headache, and I came down to borrow some aspirin, she said quickly. I had this awful headache, and when I found you were out, I thought surely you wouldn't mind if I just borrowed some aspirin. Pause here and answer question 3. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Allen said, but I'm glad you thought you knew me well enough. I never would have dreamed of coming in, Emily said, except for such a bad headache. Of course, Mrs. Allen said. Let's not say any more about it. She went over to the dresser and opened the drawer. Emily, standing next to her, watched her hands pass over the handkerchiefs and picked up the aspirin. You just take 2 of these and go to bed for an hour, Mrs. Allen said. Thank you. Emily began to move toward the door. You've been very kind. Let me know if there's anything more I can do. Thank you, Emily said, opening the door. She waited for a minute and then turned toward the stairs to her room. I'll run up later today, Mrs. Allen said, just to see how you feel. All right, everybody, that is the end of our story. Please pause and answer question 4. And then now, once you've read this final part and answered all the questions, you are going to move on to the direct instruction video and notes and complete the rest of this module. Have a great day.